Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about what must be surely the most exciting event of the year, and that is, of course, the battle for the leadership of what was left of the Tory party. We're now down to 6 candidates. That's 6 members of Parliament who are able to get another 10 members of Parliament to support them. Unfortunately, one of the stars, Suella Braverman, who was probably more desperate than anybody to become leader of the party, and has done so much over the years to become leader of the party, she failed to get as many as 10 supporters, so she's out of the race, and it's said that she's off to GB News, which seems a pretty sensible thing for her to do. I think she'll fit in very well there. So there are now 6 candidates left, and I want to talk about each of them, and I want to talk particularly about the 2 favourites, Badenoch and Jenrick. Now, the least favourite, the one least likely to succeed, is Mel Stride. Now, he's been a minister in various, particularly in the Treasury, for quite a long time. I have to say he seems quite a decent cove. I know that a lot of people say there's no such thing as a decent Tory, which is nonsense, because you only have to look at Dominic Grieve and Rory Stewart and Kenneth Clarke and many others who are perfectly decent, principled people. And I think Mel Stride is out of that mould. I think he's one of the few. In fact, he's just almost the only minister who was prepared to go on and defend Sunak throughout the election campaign, whilst all the others just disappeared, thinking, I think, about their futures. So I haven't really got anything negative to say about Mel Stride. I think he's probably all right. If I were voting, he's definitely the one that I would vote for as being the least objectionable. Second worst or least likely to succeed, according to the bookies, is Priti Patel, our favourite bully. Now, I made a video a couple of years ago about Priti Patel, and it was the most successful video I've ever produced, or most viewed, until such time as I started making my videos in Europe, visiting towns in Europe. And I explained in that video how this woman is really awful. How in 3 different departments she was accused of bullying. She was investigated for bullying. She was found guilty of bullying. And yet Boris Johnson said he had 100% confidence in her, and she remained, at the time she was Home Secretary, remained Home Secretary. She's the woman who, when Boris Johnson was Foreign Secretary and she was a junior minister in the Foreign Office, she went off to Israel. Nobody knows quite why. She had meetings with all sorts of government ministers in Israel, and including Netanyahu, it is said, without telling the Prime Minister, who was Theresa May at the time. And as I say, nobody really quite knows what that was all about, but it was extremely dishonest. In fact, she was sacked by Theresa May for lying about it in the end. She's a woman who's involved in getting contracts for some friends or friends of friends for PPE, a huge contract of 200 odd million pounds, which was for merchandise which was supplied at double the recommended price. And so they would have made a profit of 100 million plus whatever they would normally have made. They made a huge profit. And of course, no one would suggest for a moment that Priti Patel got any backhander from that, or that she got any commission put aside somewhere for when she is no longer in Parliament. But because that would be corrupt, and I'm sure she wouldn't be corrupt. So anyway, she's a really nice little woman. She seems to have got all sorts of issues. I think like Braverman and like Badenoch, these 3 they have issues, and they've got such big chips on their shoulders. They're all of them bullies. They're all aggressive. They're arrogant. They're rude. And she is really she's a piece of work, is Priti Patel, and I don't think she's ever had any chance of becoming leader of the Tory party. Next up is James Cleverly. Now, again, I can't find much bad to say about him. I mean, he's apart from the fact that he's a Tory minister, he was a foreign minister until he had to get out of the way so that Call Me Dave could come and save the country, and then he became Home Secretary. I think his one redeeming thing is that he did say that he thought the Rwanda scheme was batshit crazy. He seems a decent enough guy. He's been a military reservist for years and years and years, and I can't really find much to criticise about him. But I don't think he's got much chance of becoming leader, because he has a reputation. He's referred to in the press as Jimmy Dimley or Dim Jim and so on, and I don't think he's probably the cleverest of people in this list. Next is Tom Tugendhat. Now, Tom Tugendhat, he's a sort of pretty well-to-do. He's half French. He's come from a very good family and so on. He's been a soldier. He's served in Iraq and in Afghanistan. He seems a decent sort, and I think he's probably pretty straight. And I think he's quite likely going to get through as representing the less extreme half of the Tory party. I did find a couple of things about him which I thought are worth mentioning, and they're these: that during the September 22 Conservative Party leadership election, when he was standing, he said he did not support the UK leaving the ECHR. In October 2023, he warned that withdrawal would have negative consequences for the Good Friday Agreement, the Windsor Framework and the devolved administrations in the UK. But during the a couple of weeks ago, he said he would leave the ECHR if it was seen as not serving the interests of the British people. It's a complete about turn, and I'm very surprised that someone like him would actually do that. Of course, he's saying that he would be prepared to leave the ECHR because he just wants to pander to the crazy right wing of the party, and I thought that was a bit disappointing. Another tidbit, which is not really relevant, but it might be worth mentioning, is that on the 17th of November 2022, at Westminster Magistrate Court, he was banned from driving for 6 months after he was caught driving with his phone in his hand, and he received 6 points on his licence, in addition to the 6 he already had for 2 previous driving offences. And I think you have to question, when you're going to be a senior minister, if you can't avoid getting 3 different convictions for driving offences, it's not great. It's not a deal breaker, I'm sure. And so we come to Honest Bob. When you've got a nickname which is an ironic compliment, being called honest, it's not great. Jenrick is a complicated sort. He's a bit of a spiv, really. I think he thinks he's pretty posh and so on. He's one of these guys always sailing close to the wind, always getting away with things. He's quite charming and so on, and has a bit of the gift of the gab. But let me just read through a whole load of stuff I found about him on Wikipedia as it happens. In February 2016, he was accused of overspending in the general election, and him and 2 other MPs, their constituents were fined, or the Tory party was fined £70,000 for overspending. He was a bit of a disaster as housing minister when at the time of Grenfell, because it was felt that he was not on top of it, and he didn't do very well. And he was very unpopular with the Grenfell residents. In April 2020, the Sunday Times reported Jenrick had claimed £100,000 for a 3rd home in his constituency that he appeared to use very rarely. In November 2020, the Public Accounts Committee found that he and his junior minister, Jake Berry, had given a grant, a sort of levelling up grant to each each other's constituencies. I think it was £25 million each, and both had claimed that they knew nothing about it. They were not responsible, weren't involved in it, and it was heavily criticised by the Public Accounts Committee. During COVID, he was on television a lot saying people must stay at home, and then he was found guilty of driving 150 miles to his constituency home in Herefordshire, and on another occasion driving 40 miles to visit his parents. In June 2020, he received planning permission for an extension to a townhouse in his in London. His London townhouse. He's got several properties, and this was awarded by Tory councillors who overrode the objections of officials in the council. In January 2022, he refused a request from Liberal Democrat leader Tim Farron to review the opening of a new coal mine in Cumbria, a famous coal mine in Cumbria. In January 2020, he approved a £1 billion development of flats on behalf of Tory donor Richard Desmond, who had met him at a Tory fundraiser one evening and told him about this development. It needed rushing through, and Jenrick was housing minister at the time, and he went back to his office, and he was advised by his officials not to push this through. But anyway, he pushed it through anyhow, and this should have saved Richard Desmond £30 to £50 million. He also reduced the proportion of the development which would have to be affordable housing from 35% to 21%, which would have saved Richard Desmond another £100 million. In the end, it didn't actually go ahead. There was a judicial inquiry and so on. And he conceded in submission to the judicial inquiry that he had his intervention was unlawful by reason of apparent bias, and he admitted it had been rushed through to avoid tax for Desmond. When he became, in due course, a minister concerned with immigration, asylum seeking and so on, he said that asylum accommodation should be as basic as possible to deter people from coming to the UK. He said that the riots outside the hotel in Knowsley, those very famous and rather nasty riots, he said they were a warning to be heeded and not a phenomenon to be managed. In other words, that the rioters, he thought, probably had a case. He said that asylum seekers, they cannibalise communities by importing different lifestyles and values. He claimed wrongly that 71% of asylum seekers claim to be victims of slavery. In fact, it's less than 20%. He told a reception centre, the reception centre for children down in Kent, to paint over the famous Mickey Mouse murals because he didn't want he didn't want it to be too welcoming for asylum-seeking children. And he's a very strong supporter of Israel. He wanted to get some Holocaust memorial built in Victoria Gardens, and there was a bit of a controversy about that. His wife is the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, and he seems to be he seems involved in all sorts of pro-Israeli organisations and so on. He owns 3 homes, but he rents in his constituency a home at £2,000 a month, which the taxpayer pays for. And finally, a bit like Tom Tugendhat, in August 2021, he was fined £370 and got 3 points for speeding. And then in April 23, he was disqualified for 6 months and fined £1,639 again for speeding. So he's a guy sort of living a bit close to the edge and taking every advantage he can, and at the same time being real. He's a bit of a bully, really, being really nasty towards anyone seeking asylum, unreasonably so. And I think he would be the toughest on immigration if he became leader of the Tory party and he eventually became Prime Minister, although I think that's probably very, very unlikely. And so to the red hot favourite, Kemi Badenoch, and I have to say, it is a complete and utter mystery to me how this woman is so popular. It's only my view, but she comes across, whenever I see her, as being extremely arrogant, aggressive, rude, domineering, condescending. all the qualities she has seem to me outstanding qualities are negative. I think she's a most awful woman, and it's not just impressions. I mean, there's been some stuff in the press, The Guardian, particularly in the last couple of weeks, and I'd like to read to you some of the things that have been said. And the first concerns an article concerning bullying, and I'll read you one or two excerpts from this Guardian article. Kemi Badenoch, the frontrunner to be the next Conservative Party leader, has been accused of creating an intimidating atmosphere in the government department she used to run, with some colleagues describing it as toxic. At least 3 officials found her behaviour so traumatising that they felt they had no other choice but to leave. Sources allege that at least 3 senior officials in Badenoch's private office felt, in effect, pushed out by what they claimed was bullying and traumatising behaviour by Badenoch. Others who worked closely with the former business secretary have told The Guardian they struggled with her behaviour and the atmosphere was created. They were said to have dreaded meetings, as they claimed individuals were regularly left feeling humiliated by Badenoch and reduced to tears afterwards on a handful of occasions. You see, it's just like Braverman, it's just like Patel, bully, bully, bully. And as I said before, these women have they've got chips on their shoulders. They've got issues. She particularly, Badenoch, she's a really, really unpleasant piece of work. And the idea that she should be a leader of the party, I mean, or heaven forbid, Prime Minister, I mean, it's just unthinkable. I don't think she would ever be elected Prime Minister. I don't think enough people would ever vote for someone as awful as her to be Prime Minister. And then, on top of that, The Guardian came out with another article which is equally as damning, and this concerns her expenses and abuse of her position, really, in terms of expenses. Kemi Badenoch asked officials to pay for a holiday flight with taxpayers' money to the United States while in government, but was rebuffed by her former department's top civil servant, The Guardian understands. Another senior departmental source claimed Badenoch had used her official ministerial car, paid for by the taxpayer, to take her to the gym in Knightsbridge twice a week on the way to work, leaving the driver waiting outside for an hour each time. We're paying for this. She also used the government car to travel to her parliamentary seat in Saffron Walden, Essex, on Fridays for constituency work and local political events. Departmental insiders claimed the request to book and pay for flights was typical of the way in which Badenoch dealt with civil servants. The former minister allegedly admitted in meetings that she had asked taxpayer-funded political advisers to go to her home in South London to pack her suitcases for work trips abroad. Sources said she paid a compliment to one aide in front of colleagues for their aptitude in packing. The same taxpayer-funded advisor was spotted by civil service colleagues returning to the office with bags of expensive suits and dresses from outlets like Fold and Boss, having been sent out by the former minister on shopping trips. They were also asked to buy Christmas presents for Badenoch's children, ex-colleagues alleged, as well as gifts for other friends. The former cabinet minister refunded the cost of the purchases. One departmental source said the stuff she asked them to do was well out of their remit. I'm amazed they put up with it, but I'm not sure they felt they had much choice. Kemi treated them like a PA. It felt like such an abuse of taxpayers' funded time. And finally, departmental insiders claimed that officials were asked to book dentist and doctor's appointments for Badenoch and her family. On one occasion, she was said to have asked if the department would cover the cost of new glasses. Is that someone who should be a leader of the Tory party? Is that someone who should be in line to be Prime Minister should there be a change of government in the future? The woman is ghastly. She's awful. And as I said before, it's going to be down to the Tory membership to decide who leads the Conservatives, and she's red hot favourite. Red hot favourite. Now, I did look at the voting records of all these runners and riders in this rather miserable race, and it's quite shocking to see how some of them they voted. It's quite interesting. Those who voted to remain were Tugendhat, Melstride, and believe it or not, Jenrick. He voted to remain in the EU. Those who voted to leave were Patel and Cleverly. Badenoch wasn't even in Parliament at the time of the referendum. But all of them have voted as follows. They've all voted at various times, according to their records, and you can find it online quite easily. They've voted to reduce welfare payments. They voted in favour of increasing the state pension age. We already have one of the lowest, if not the lowest, state pensions in the world. They've all voted against further EU integration. They've all voted against the right to remain for EU nationals already living in the UK. They've all voted against imported goods meeting UK standards. In other words, they're in favour of us being able to import poorer quality goods. They've all voted against nationalising the railways. They've all voted against more powers for Northern Ireland or for Scotland or for Wales, and they've all voted against further powers or more powers for local authorities. They want to keep all the power, and they've all voted to reduce local government funding, despite the fact that half the councils in the country seem to be on the verge of bankruptcy. They've all voted in favour for making it easier to remove British citizenship, and rather sinister this, they've all voted for mass surveillance of people's communications and activities. In other words, they really want the government to be able to look at any of your emails and whatever you're looking at online and so on. They've also voted in favour of authorising criminal conduct by undercover officers and covert sources. And they all voted in favour of more union regulation of union activity. Now, what is, I think, most concerning of all is this, that very obviously, you know, certain things. I know, for example, no one wants to talk about Brexit now. It's really a dead duck, and everybody's got very bored with it, and no one wants to hear about it. And likewise, climate change. I mean, very few people want to talk about it. If I made a video on climate change, nobody's going to watch it. Nobody's interested. But listen to this, really, because frankly, we all know. I mean, it's just so obvious that the climate is warming up, that things are changing. We all know how it's affecting wildlife and so on, and sea levels and the melting ice caps and all the rest of it. And if we don't do anything, we're going to have big problems, not least of all with population movements, because such a large part of the world is going to be uninhabitable because of global warming and for food production. So global warming clearly is really, really, really important, and we should be doing much, much, much more than we're doing to try and combat it. But listen to this. All these people here, everyone, Tugendhat, Stride, Badenoch, Patel, Cleverly and Jenrick, they have all voted against improving air quality, against preservation of environmental protections, against restriction on fracking, against measures to prevent climate change, against measures to improve biodiversity, and against measures to improve environmental water quality. And when you read that, you think these people just don't deserve to be in power. I mean, really, do we want these sort of people? I know, you know, a lot of us are a bit disappointed and never really expected that much from the new Labour government because of our situation, our economic situation following Brexit. But this lot, really, such a shabby lot. In fact, I suppose at some conversation it's probably going to matter who wins, because they're going to be in opposition probably for a very long time, and rightly so. But anyway, that's what I think about it, and we have a long way to wait until we hear who actually is taking over as leader of the Conservatives. But anyway, that's it. If you've watched this far, thank you very much indeed, as always, and until next time, thanks again, and bye for now.